All right, we are continuing with the laws of Passover, and this is Tur Orach Chaim. Tur, of course, Rav Yaakov ben Usher. He was in 11th hundreds, and he was the son of Rosh, which was in the 1000s, contemporary of Rashi. Or actually, the Rocky Rosh was beginning of the 1200s, and his father was right after Rashi in the 1100s, contemporary of the Rambam, Baal Itter, etc. Because of Rashi. Now we're up to Tuf Nun, 450. Because of Rashi wrote that Yisrael Shalva Kikar Mechaveri Kaidem Pesach. If a person borrowed a loaf from his friend before Pesach, Tzarech Lefaroi Achar Pesach, he must pay after Pesach. Ve'imo Mishum Isser Chametz Shavar Lo Pesach. There's no permission about Chametz that's going to be on Pesach. Yes, you can destroy that loaf, or you can, or whatever, but you have to get him a new loaf. That's not considered having Chametz over Pesach. Kevon Shalahi Be'ain B'Shas Isser, since it was not physical. It was not be'en, it was not present at the time of the prohibition. V'yesh b'ay mishum gezaloi ene for him. There's no issue of theft if he does not repay that specific loaf. V'yisrael shem b'kabel akum kikaris beribis b'chol shavua. And a Jew who receives a loaf from a non-Jew as interest every week. Kasav Aviyas, read the Aviyas you wrote. Instead give me flour or money for the interest instead of actually the loaf of bread. And even afterwards they come with a calculation. As long as you didn't accept it on Pesach itself, the loaf. Sha'ala l'Rashi, Rashi posed a question. Yisrael v'yakum sheish lo tanur b'shutafos, a Jew and a non-Jew who have an ownership, partnership in an oven. Mahu loymelakim. What can he say to the oven? Toivata shel Pesach ve'ani etel achar kach. It's permitted to say to the non-Jew that you take the profits of Pesach and I will take afterwards. Ve'hishiv yes no kun Pesach, and he answered he should stipulate before Pesach. Vital damim moisos shavua, that he should take money from that week. V'harab Shimshon ben Rav Avraham Omer. Rav Shimshon ben Avraham wrote, Ma'aseh ba liyadai, an incident came before him, or came before me, because he's writing in the first person. B'Yisrael shahaya lutana. Yisrael had an oven. Va'afu ba yakum chametz Pesach, and a non-Jew came to bake chametz there on Pesach. Uva oife shahaya gizbar shel Yisrael, and the baker was the treasurer of the Jew came. Vehevi like Kikaroi Sachar Pesach Mishkar Hatanor, and he brought him loaves after Pesach as payment for the oven. Vasarti Loyla Kaplam, and I said it's forbidden to accept those as payment. Not only is the chametz, which is forbidden, Yisrael Bischar Tenurai, which a Jew acquired a payment for his oven. Vahayalei Chamtzoi Shel Yisrael Sha'avar Olav Pesach, and it became chametz of a Jew that remained over Pesach, because that was going to be the payment, and it was already set aside, and that was already going to be designated for the Jew. So already was the Jew's chametz on Pesach, and it was, even though it was given after Pesach, it already was chametz that owned by a Jew, or should have been given to a Jew, that was left over Pesach. Ella, afilu ma'is asur l'kabel b'schari. Even money is forbidden to receive as payment. Kevon, the chametz of Pesach asur hana, because you're not allowed to have any hana from chametz. Even though you're right, you're not going to eat it. But if you are going to have hana from selling chametz or using chametz or making chametz, even if it's for the partner, that is forbidden on Pesach. And what happened? The non-Jew came to use the oven, so you had hana from chametz because you had hana from him making chametz. So therefore, that's enough not to receive payment on Pesach. That is the stringent point of view. Havile mishtaker be'isurai hana, and it would be considered profiting from a prohibited benefit. Vafilu chamtzai shalakim, even though the chametz belongs to the guy. Asur lahanasa yafilu Pesach. It's forbidden to have benefit from it on Pesach. Miu im kibel kikar hamais muter lanais mahem. However, if you already received the money, then it's permitted to benefit them. Ditnan gabe arla kuchli kerem, and we learned regarding arla and forbidden vineyard mixture. So micharan v'kidesh bismaneim mikudeshes, that if one sold and betrothed a woman with the proceeds, then it's still good. Umiu sharli Yisrael However, for a Yisrael to rent lahaskir tanur lakum, to rent the oven to the non-Jew, al manas she'oifas by matzah, on condition that he only bake matzah in it. Ve'im oifa chametz ein zakik by, but if he makes chametz, the Jews are responsible. Get it now, like we learn. Scharoi lasois imai malachas acheres is taught. He hired him to perform another task. Afal pi shemer loy aver loy chavis shal yayin. Even he says to him, "Move for me a barrel of wine of yayin esach, wine that was used for a pagan ritual. From place to place, it's still mutter. Mutter loimer. It's forbidden to say to the servant, "Lavdoi Pesach," to work on Pesach. Hilkach dinar zev kanav echel. Here is a coin and go buy and eat. Afal pi she'eda shik nechametz. Sorry, it is permitted to do that to a servant, even though he knows he's going to go buy chametz. Ve'ein zeh kaineh chametz. It's not like he went ahead and bought the chametz. Afal pi shemzoyin of olav, even though he's responsible for the servant's food. Aval lo yomer loy tzei va'echel va'ani fareh. He did not say go and eat and I'll reimburse you. He paid him beforehand. So again, if he said go eat, I'll pay you, reimburse you, then you're reimbursing for chametz, then it's not allowed. But if he gives the money first, then it's fine. So if you want to rent out an oven before Pesach, for Pesach, you have to get the money first. If you get the money first, then it's fine. Whatever it's done is done. But if you get the money afterwards, then you're having a benefit for what was done on Pesach, and that was chametz, and that is not allowed. Asr lahascher kli la'akum. It's mutter to. It's forbidden. To rent a vessel to a dish to a non-Jew. But Pesach on Pesach, she'av shel mahem chametz. That he's going to go ahead and cooking it chametz, because if one there desires to continue to the existence of the prohibition through something else, because the utensil should not crack, because he gets benefits from the use of a vessel that doesn't sit and crack. By using it, a lot of times we have this with cars. People pay other people to drive fancy cars that aren't being driven a long time, so the gas shouldn't settle, so the fluid shouldn't settle, etc., etc. So things also, it's always a benefit to its use. Otherwise, it sits in the heat or in the cold, and it could get ruined by non-use. And get a crack in it or something. So the kli should not crack. Furthermore, since utensil itself is forbidden for benefit, even initially it's forbidden to rent out. V'loi dami lahalatanya b'toiseftas, and this is not what we learned in the Tosefta, that maskir adam chamayro la'akum, that a person can rent his donkey to a non-Jew, lahavi lav chametz makam l'makam, to transport chametz from place to place. The asim chamar any aser, because what's he renting? He's renting the donkey, not renting the chametz. Whatever he does with the donkey, it's a different story. The donkey itself is not chametz; it's not forbidden. So therefore, the hana he's getting is from the use of the donkey, not from what the donkey is actually transporting. Avala kli, atzmai aser. But here the kli itself is forbidden, absorbing the chametz, it's getting the chametz in it, and now the kli is chametz, and now you're getting benefit from a chametz kli that is not allowed for to have any benefit of it. Now we're going to go now to 451, which is tough. Nun Aleph. It's a very, very long and complicated Tur, but basically the Tur lays out the laws of kashering kalim, of making vessels kosher. This is for Pesach, but it really goes for all year round. And basically, this is the paradigm. This is what Shulchan Aruch and Ramah and most other later poskim use to learn the laws of kasher and kalim. So instead of going through bit by bit, which will take a long time and it can be a little bit bogged down-ish, I'm going to give a little of a summary of it, and then we'll move on. And maybe I'll make a video of it separately. It'll probably take about like a half hour just to talk about this one separately. But let's go through the basics. So now, if you want to go ahead and know how to make a utensil that's non-kosher kosher, or you want to make it that has chametz, leavened bread in it, and you want to make it good for Pesach, these are the laws. So first of all, a pot lid, and so let me just go through. Let me get to the summary. Sorry, I wrote summaries in a couple places. Here we go. Okay, absorption methods and kashering. Okay, so first of all, the Torah discusses different utensils and different absorption methods. First of all, there's libun. Libun is when a utensil is used with a fire. You put a pot directly into a fire. Hagala. That's purging it with boiling water. That's boiling up a pot of water and putting your utensil into that boiling water. And shtifa and washing, it's just simple rinsing out and cleaning. Okay? So, for example, if dough was baked on it, then it requires libun. Even though it was cold, but it still requires libun because the flour and the stuff can absorb into the little cracks and into the metals of itself. So therefore, that requires to be burnt. Okay? If it just, now, the rule is that kivoloi kach poltoi, just as it absorbs, so it expels. So therefore, just as something would absorb, so too it will expel. That is the basic rule of koshering. So if something's used directly on fire, like a barbecue grill, then you have to use real fire, real heat to make sure that on your the grill itself or on any utensils that you used right on top on the grill. So that itself, you can't just put in boiling water. You can't just clean. Since it was used fire, you got to use fire itself. If a pot is usually for cooking and cooking with water, then you dump it into boiling water. And if something gets used only with cold, you only use cold. Okay, so let's see what he says. And this is used for koshering from non-kosher to kosher, and also to get rid of all chametz. So an earthenware pot used for chametz throughout the year cannot be koshered. Earthenware cannot be rectified. It's porous material. There's nothing to do. If you put it into a fire, it's not going to be rectified. So the best thing is you clean them out thoroughly. There's no visible chametz remains on Pesach. You store them away on Pesach. You put them hidden, you put them blocked, and that's it. Because it cannot be kashered. So anything earthenware, you have mugs. Now the question is, what happens if they're glazed? So he doesn't talk about they're glazed. Glazed, if it's a real good glaze on top of the pottery, then it's no longer pottery. Now it's sort of like glass. So it'll be the same loss as glass or plastic if it has a real good glaze. Not if you go to like one of these paint your own places and they throw it and they put it in the kiln. That's not enough. But if they put a real glaze on it and freshly done, and it's no longer pottery, now it's really a glaze that's on top of it that's really protecting it. So then it's probably under the same laws as glass or plastic. But other earthenware stuff, you could just not kosher it. Now, burning earthenware does not normally help. Even intense heat is generally ineffective for earthenware. The reason is because first of all, you're not going to do it so hot that the vessel's going to crack. You do it hot enough to get rid of the chametz, the vessel's going to crack, and that's what you're not going to do. Okay, now, refiring in a kiln. If earthenware is returned to a pottery kiln and fully fired again, then it comes permitted. The vessel is heated equally inside and outside. There's no concern the owner will reduce the heat. This only is professional kiln used by a professional potter, and again, the owner itself should not be the one doing it because the owner is going to want to take it out when it gets too hot. If a professional does it and knows that it's doing it in a proper way and is not responsible for cracks, so then you may be relying on it. Okay, now special clay oven. So the rule is that if it's done for external heating, like for instance, you put things on top of it, so then that's fine. Then you could do it with heat. But if it was done when you put the stuff inside the oven, then you have to fill it with coals and really get the heat on the inside. Metal pots can be kosher, obviously, and if they're filled with coal and heated properly. So in other words, metal pots. If it's used, what it's used for. If it's used with boiling water, then you just overboil that pot, and you take another pot that's full of boiling water, and you dip it into that pot of boiling water, and you let it soak for a little bit, and take it out after it's completely cleaned. So that's fine. Again, if it's used over a barbecue, then it has to have real heat, like on open fire, and really be heated. So let's say, for instance, we're talking about you have a stovetop oven that has flame, not an electric one, but like one that has actually gas flame, and you have what are they called? The prongs that hold up the pot. So that you have to really get really, really hot for like a few minutes, because that's always hot. That's always being used with heat. You have to sit that for a good 10 minutes in heat to get that kosher. but metal pots that are used mostly with the chametz is inside the pot and it's boiling water. So then again, you dip that into boiling water for a few minutes, and that's good after it's completely clean. Knives. So first of all, agala, boiling water, that's good. You dip it into boiling water, even if it was used with heat. Okay, you have to remove the rust completely. You have to make sure it's polished and clean. If the knife has any cracks or pits in it, then it will require liban. Then hagal is not good. Then you have to acquire actual onto a flame. But if it's basically a smooth knife and you clean it, stainless steel, and you clean it, and then you can put it into boiling water. Okay. General methods of countering is how utensils used is, again, like we talked about. If it's used in fire, like spits and grills, then you have to do liba and you have to use it on if it's using hot liquids, if it's a kli rishon that's using hot liquids, in other words, it goes directly into boiling water, like a ladle, like a stir, like a something you stir with, like a knife that goes directly and cuts hot meat. So then you have to do straight into a gullah. If it's only a klisheni, like for instance, if it's like a cup and you only pour water from a hot pot into it, or from a beaker into the cup, it's only used as a klisheni, a secondary vessel, then hagala on the secondary vessel is enough. But obviously, it's ridiculous. You just do it, dip whatever you're using into boiling pot, and that you know it's good. Irui from a kli rishon. For instance, let's say it's like you make tea on Shabbos. So you take it, you pour it from your hot water urn into a cup. Then you pour from a cup to a second cup. And let's say you have one of those things where you put tea inside it. Okay, you put the tea bag inside, or you put tea scents inside. It's like a little cage, and then you pour hot water on top of that. And that basically infuses and it lets the tea go into your cup, if that's how you use it. So again, you boil water and you clean it that way. Just the way you use it, that's the way you clean it. Plates and dishes, some authority, so most, even the Torah would say, it's better to do with kli rishon, but again, it depends how it's all used. If you have dishes that you use for the table, and you basically always take the meat out of a pot and then put it onto a plate. The plate is never what's used to cook. You never put the plate in the microwave. It's used only for when you take the meat or the food out of a pot already, and then you put it into a serving dish and you put it onto a plate. That's really a kli rishon. It's really a kli sheni, actually. But in that situation, it's still hot, so that would only require hagala kli sheni. Horn utensils. Spoons, like for instance, spoon made from horn material, they get damaged in boiling water. That also is like pottery and cannot be kashered. I'll just tell you, interesting. Everyone knows, well, not everyone knows, but anyone who does the searching for the chametz on the eve before Pesach, so we use a wooden spoon. So the kids always ask, why do you have a wooden spoon? So here's the thing. So with the wooden spoon is the reason why the custom came to use a wooden spoon as part of searching for the chametz is because people used to use wooden spoons to cook, and I actually use a wooden spoon in my kitchen to cook. And then, since you can't make it kosher, right? It's impossible to make a wooden spoon kosher; it's just too porous. You're not going to put it directly into a fire; it's going to burn, and you're not going to put it into boiling water because it's not going to be good enough. It's too porous. So therefore, so these days you could put it away, and that's fine. But those days, it used to be in pre generations, they would basically, wooden spoon is cheap enough. You would basically burn it with your chametz, because you can't kosher anyway. You can't make it kosher. So you burn it with your chametz. And then you get a new one for Pesach, and that one for Pesach you use the whole year round also. And that's actually what I still do in my kitchen. For my meat, wooden spoon, I have a couple wooden spoons for meat, but one of them I mark every single year with the year. And I get it new on Pesach. And on Pesach, I use it the whole Pesach. Then I bring it into my regular kitchen for the rest of the year. I use it the entire year. And then before next year Pesach, I burn that with the chametz, and then I get a new spoon, and that's what I do. Sort of like, it's not required, but I do that to recall the custom of previous generations. So same thing. Horn material is like pottery, cannot really be kashered, too porous to be in water, and it's going to be ruined in direct heat. And again, if it's glazed, real glaze, professional glaze, then it could be like plastic or like glass. So the Torah says very specifically what could be kashered. So you have stone. Stone could be stone, metal, could be. And the question is whether or not wood can be. Like I said, some say wood cannot be. The Torah says that if you're willing to subject the wood to soak it really in boiling water, so then it's like then it's good. But if it's like a cracked or porous wood, then it's not something that should be done. And anyway, so some authorities say that stone. So stone needs to get hot water poured on top of it. If you put hot things on top of it, it needs to put hot water on top of it, but that could be kosher. Metal obviously could be kosher. Stone and dung vessels. So another opinion compares them to earthenware, requires libun, real actual fire. The Torah says Hagala works with these as well. Silver vessels normally are only used with cold. You don't want to put them in really hot water. So rinsing that is good. If your silver vessels have a lip that's curled, then it's a problem because it's impossible to get into that curl. Sometimes around the lip where people drink, there's a curl in the silver vessel, and that will be like a place where it's impossible to really get. But if it's smooth, then you could just rinse it out very thoroughly. Better bets with soap, rinse out thoroughly, and then it's fine. Meat salting baskets. Baskets used for salting meat require hagala, require boiling of water. Frying pans. So frying pans, you could, you'd use it again, you would use to fry, so that you'd have to use libum. Hagala would not be good enough because you use it over direct heat and you use it with oil, so that would then require. Some Ramekel and say Hagala would be good enough because technically the outside is on the fire, but the inside is really with liquid. The Torah says Hagala would be sufficient in that. You could just use boiling water, dip it into it with boiling water for a few minutes. That'll be fine as long as it's perfectly clean, as it's metal. Large vessels. A vessel is too large for a pot of boiling water. Now, these days, nothing too large because there's something, some people have these huge vats where they boil the water. In some communities, they do that actually. And if you're in a small community, they may not be able to do this. But some larger communities, they do this where they have these huge vats of boiling water, and they tell people, "Come, bring your dishes." And basically, any size pot or pan, or even a soup pot, anything basically fits into it. They throw it in, and then with utensils, they grab it out. With tongs, they grab it out. So, but let's say it's too large, and let's say you don't have the ability to throw it into this huge, large vat of boiling water. So you could do half at a time, right? You could basically dip one half into boiling water, leave that for a while. Then you could flip it over and dip the other half into boiling water, leave that half. We have no concern that the chametz moves around inside the pot. Once one half is kashered, then you flip it around. That's fine as well. Again, the water has to maintain the heat, the bubbling during the whole process. You can't take it off the fire. You can't take the boiling water off the fire. You can't let it cool down. It has to maintain. Handles of utensil together have to be kosher with the utensil. Even though you don't cook with the handles, but you're always touching the handles with chametz hands, with chametz gloves, with chametz utensils. So therefore, handles have to be kosher as well. Anything that's patched, hagala will not work because it can't get into the patch. So if you have a utensil, like a metal utensil, but it's like plastered over, not good. Then you have to either take off the patch and kosher it, or you have to cover over. Now you could do is you cover over the patch. Like for instance, when you want to cover over, let's say like you want to kosher a microwave. Microwaves actually could be kosher. The stainless steel, they could be made kosher, but the inside screen should be covered over with either cardboard or with parchment paper, because it's very hard to kosher that part of it. So therefore, you cover over the part that you can't reach, and then it's fine. So if you have a patched pot on the outside, you cover it over, it's okay. If it's on the inside, what are you going to do? Because your patch is going to just boil away if you use it. So I guess that pot cannot be used for Pesach. Pot lids. Pot lids require hagala. No matter what the lower pot was used for, definitely requires hagala because of condensation. So there's no question. However, if it was used for dough, if you use a special pot lid for dough and you let the dough rise and the dough presses against it, dough is the one thing that doesn't make a difference regarding how it's done. Even though dough is cold, right? Like for instance, but it's talking about baking dough, right? So if you have, let's say, a Dutch oven and you bake dough in a Dutch oven, then the top will require, then it requires libun. So even though you use it, let's say you take the regular pot and you put it into an oven and you usually make roast with it, but if you make dough with it, then it requires libun, including the lid. I hope that was clear. I was a little bit discombobbled for a second, but I think that hopefully that's clear. So again, regular pots used in the oven. If it's used with liquid, hagala. If you make dough in it, if you make bread in it, use it with dough, then it requires libun, actual on a fire. I don't think that if you use it for cold, for instance, if you have a regular mixing bowl that's used with cold, let's say a metal mixing bowl, it's used with cold dough, I don't think you need to do a libun. Hagala, you probably rinsing it out is probably enough, but if you want to be sure, then hagala is enough. But if you know, that's what I think. But it's talking about when you bake bread in it. Okay. I'm not 100. I'm 90% sure it's referring to that, but I'll recheck it. I'll try to come back with an answer to that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's referring to. Okay. A lid covering a dough in the stove, so it requires libun, like we said. Okay, mortars and spice grinders. So the reason why mortars and spice grinders are important is because certain spices have to have sharpness. There's something called sharpness. Now, for the most part, Tur does not rule that sharpness itself imparts flavor. A lot of the later Ashkenazi and Sephardi authorities rule that if you cut onions, if you cut pickles, so then it imparts a flavor. For the most part, Tur does not rule that way. If it's, only heat, real heat does. But there are certain things, though, that are the spices that will impart things. And obviously, so let's see what he talks about. So let's see. So let's see you doing things, let's say, with things to crush, let's say breadcrumbs or garlic or different spices, right? So use a mortar, or you use a crusher, or you use a grinder for that. So according to Rashi Rabbeinu Tam, hagala is ineffective. You need libun. According to Rabbeinu Yitzchak, hagala works. According to Rashi, it Rabbeinu Yitzchak. So the Tur, hagala is sufficient in regards to smooth and crack-free mortars and grinders and stuff. And the reason why you need hagala, even though it's cold, even though you're only grinding things cold, requires hagala because it's almost impossible to clean them out completely. Because it uses just fine things, hagala will get to all the places it needs to, and that will be enough. So you do like a higher level of trying to get out the non-kosher, get out the chametz, because of the materials that it's used, the way it is, and it wants to make sure you get the boiling water into everything. It's almost impossible to clean just by itself. Dough boards and kneading troves. Okay, so what about them? So this is usually used with cold dough, like we talked about before, right? So, or a leavening vessel, in other words, your bread basket that you use to put your dough mixture in and let it rise, that requires hagala. So again, so that was right. So what I said before was right, that the dough, where you cook in, requires libun, but the ones where it's cold dough, that still requires hagala, even though the dough is cold. Tables and storage boxes. So it's accustomed to pour boiling water over them. Anywhere where you have you have a table, so you boil water over them, or countertops and tables you cover. So that's why you come to people's house, you see everything is like tinfoil from top to bottom, or plastic table covers, or very hard paper, and they cover the tables with it, and they cover the plastic. So what we do is we have the plastic, the lucite. Not really lucite, it's more of a corrugated plastic that covers all our countertops. We clean it thoroughly, and then we cover all countertops and we tape it down. And then our tables, we do one tablecloth with plastic, we tie it down. Then we do a second tablecloth with plastic, and then we put our regular tablecloth on it, just to make sure that we don't have a chance to mix. Now, of course, these are stringencies. Technically, if you use a trivet the whole entire year, but again, you never know when you spilled. You might have spilled hot liquid or hot chametz onto the table, and then on Pesach you may do the same thing. So to avoid that, that's why we have to cover the tables, or we have to pour boiling water on them. Probably easiest just to cover them than to pour boiling water on them. Beer barrels. So barley beer that was stored in earthenware barrels. So then you're allowed to use them for wine on Pesach after Agala. You could kasher with Agala. Earthenware cannot be kashered only when chametz is absorbed through fire. So if it's just for fermenting, you can use Agala. So therefore, earthenware cups. So if you use like a mug, then or use something that you use and put into a microwave or something like that, then not good because use it with heat. If you use it always not with heat, just to hold things, hold cold chametz. Like for instance, let's say you have a special mug, earthenware mug or wooden mug that you use specifically to hold beer, and it's always cold beer. So you could do Agala, and that would be enough for that because it's always with cold, and rinsing out is not enough because it's porous. But Agala would be enough because it's one step higher. So that would work according to Tur. And this is a famous dispute that's regarding earthenware that's used with cold liquids. A lot of authorities say it can't be, but Torah rules that it could be. Minig Ashkenaz, way to go. Real Minig Ashkenaz, Yekish German Minig Ashkenaz. Okay, vessels used only with cold chametz. So if a chametz was used only with cold, so then like for instance, they then be used for all foods as long as you wash it out thoroughly. Okay, you have to wash it. Obviously, you have to wash it out thoroughly. You can't just take it dirty. If it's only used for cold, like a cereal bowl, let's say, it's always used with cold milk. You wash it out thoroughly, then you could use it with dry chametz. And if you want to use it, then you wash it out thoroughly, and then it's fine. Then you can use it. Now, glazed earthenware. So again, some treat it like earthenware, and some say if it's really professionally done glaze, like we talked about before, then it could be sort of like with glass. Okay, wooden vessels coated with resin, so they're also treated like wooden vessels or like earthenware. Drinking vessels, wood, earthenware, glass. So then they can be used after washing, so long as they were only used with cold. And what's interesting is that glass technically does not need to be kashered at all. Glass does not have any sort of absorption. So glass, even if it was used with hot, like if you have, like for instance, Pyrex, or you have glass. So a lot of people say Pyrex like earthenware, but really Pyrex and glass, they don't have absorption, and therefore, even if you used it with hot chametz or hot non-kosher, you could just rinse it out, clean it thoroughly, and then you could use them on Pesach. So I think that like blows some people away, like wow. But yeah, that's how it works. Plastic is a bigger question. Some people treat plastic like earthenware. Some people treat plastic like glass. I tend to treat plastic like glass. Also, there's no absorption. It's a synthetic material, and it doesn't really absorb anything, taste in it. So think of it this way. If you're going to put, let's say, fish brine into your glass, and then you, with a quick rinse, you would then, put milk in it and drink it, then it's fine. But if you think that the fish brine gave taste to your plastic cup, and you're not going to want to drink from it afterwards unless you really soak it in boiling water, or you put soap in it for 2 days, then you have your answer. And then obviously you cannot use it. Okay, let's get through these siman. And this is a very, very long siman. I didn't really go through it inside because it is very long. I'll make another video to go inside. But let's go and let's see if we can tackle the next couple. They're a little bit long, but let's see if we can tackle the next couple so we can knock them down, because Pesach's coming. Tomorrow is the 1st of Nisan, so it's only 15 days left to Pesach. It's 2 weeks from today is the day before Pesach. Tomorrow is the 2 weeks. Tomorrow is the first day of Pesach. It's coming very, very fast, so we got a lot of stuff to do. And I want to get to the Haggadah stuff, because the Haggadah stuff and the Seder stuff, that's like very interesting stuff. This stuff is like very technical and some a little bit boring, useful, but more technical. So let's get through this stuff so we get through the fun stuff. Okay, so let's say you want to do a Haggadah. Let's say you actually have a vessel we talked about before, and you actually now have to go ahead and purge it with hot water. How do you do it? Say Haggadah the way you do Haggadah, like one who takes a large cauldron filled with water and brings it to a boiling point. Sorry about that. Oh, machnes ba kol hakelim, and he places all his utensils into it. You can do more than one utensil at a time, by the way. Ukli gadol sheina yachal lachnos l'soicha, because you can't fit a large utensil into it. You fill it up with water, bring it to a boil. So let's say you have a big soup pot. You could bring the soup pot itself up to bring it to a boil and let it flow over. Saviv mitiv shimalahu hativ, and make sure its rim is around its opening, so that so then you make a rim around it, around the opening. Let's say of clay or something, so you know that it for sure boils to the tippy top. The other way to do it is obviously let it boil. Then you put, let's say, like a hot brick into it or something, or a hot metal thing that's kosher already, and then that will help it overflow and spill along the sides. Or the other way to do it is, of course, you could put it through half and half into another one. But again, it's a big soup pot. You're not going to fit into anything else. Even on its side, this is the way you could do it. Again, after it's fully cleaned. And the water will reach its lip. And if he wishes, he may take a heated vessel, like I just said, or a burning torch, and he can throw it in while it's boiling, and the water will boil even more strongly, and it'll go over its rim. The kasaf rif mashahai lehu lemanai bega yaira ad de paltai, and the rif wrote that one who leaves the utensil in the cauldron until they release their absorbent contents. The kasaf aviezri miadel shashul plita. How do you know exactly when it's released? When the time for releasing? So ulai shayim ulsaycham. You leave it there for the time chayzrin or bailin, that they will. In other words, it'll absorb again. L'kach yira shemayim aroitz lagil kelim harbei miachad. A God-fearing person who wishes to kasher utensils together, yishaham mishas la'es tashmishan. He should leave them unused for 24 hours beforehand. So this is the best thing to do, because we know there's a rule. Any kli that's clean and not used 24 hours, any taste that's inside it comes what's called pugum, comes distasteful. So therefore, if you want to, let's say, kasher a pot or a utensil for Pesach, if it's brand new, you don't have to wait. But if it's not brand new, so then you leave it, you clean it, leave it 24 hours, and then you do the hagala, and then you know you're covered. The kevan, the taima pagum and asurin, because then the spoiling, there's no usher there because it's already a disgusting taste, and it's not forbidden. Friday he performs hagal during the bit of time before the 5th hour on the eve of Pesach. That because after that permission begins, then the spoiledness doesn't protect you anymore. And the Torah's father Rush wrote, the Kaidim Zman Isura Yachal Agia Afilu Kali Ben Yaimai, that before the time of permission begins, one may kasher even a utensil used within the same day. Afilu Ein B'Mayim Shishem Levatloi, even if the water does not contain 60 times absorbed amount. Aval Mizman Isur Availach, by the time that it's prohibited and further. V'chein B'chol Yoma Hashana Habal Agia Kli Shabul B'Isur, and likewise throughout the year when someone wishes to kasher a utensil that absorbed something that's asur, non-kosher food. He would not kasher it unless it was not been used within the past 24 hours. Or the water that's boiling in is being more than 1/60th of the entire amount of the pot. Laskina and Lahaitzian Miyad, and the custom is to insert them and remove them immediately. The Kasav is al Shem Rashi, and this is the response of Rashi. Shemayid Lacher Agala Bar Mayim Resachin Alehem. Immediately the Agala, while boiling water is still upon them. Tzarech Shutazan Biyad B'mayim karim, they may be rinsed immediately with cold water. So that you not absorb for the boiling water anything else into it. Rav Hai, and Rav Hai Goin, one of the Gonim, he said that also. This is our custom. Not because we truly fear absorption of the water upon them, since there's no concern that, as we previously explained, that Ella Shinagu Khan, rather it became a custom. Kasav Rashbam, the Rashbam wrote, Shehitzrech Lagia Leschilas Ha'ira Magilin Ba Sha'ar Kalim, that one first you kasher the cauldron itself, in which all the utensils will be kasher. In other words, if you're going to use something to boil water, that itself has to be kasher first. Obviously, it's sort of like a Captain Obvious, but the Rashbam wrote it. You kasher that first, and the best way to do that is let it boil over, and then you put something hot in it so it boils over the lip, and now you know it's kashered. Then you could then rinse it out with cold water and reboil it again, and now you could use that stuff for kashering other stuff. But the truth is, I don't know if you really have to. I know the Torah is like saying it, but any chametz that will be in the boiling water, I guess you're afraid the chametz in the boiling water is going to be absorbed into the pot, but that's not going to be edible. I mean, the way that's going to be boiling, any little minute amount that could be boiling in the boiling water, it'll be nullified. I mean, I can't imagine that would impart any taste whatsoever. We were talking about couple levels now in boiling water. It basically will kill. It will kill it. It'll kill bacteria. It'll kill the food. The kach pasuk Rashi. Rashi says also you should make sure that the thing that you're using agala was kasher for v'chein. Higher and Rava, so to the Rava ruled this way. V'chen yesh b'shuva sagainim, and the Gainim also had similar. That one washes a large cauldron and purges it with boiling water. Thus it becomes fit, and then it's rinsed with cold water. And expels the chametz from it first. And then he boils water in it without any measure. In other words, you just put how much you fill up. Then you must ensure that the water does not stop boiling. For if the boiling stops, it is forbidden to kasher in them. And he removes them and rinses them with cold water. So again, you take your pot, you kasher it, you boil it over water, rinse it out cold water, then you bring it again to boil. It doesn't have to be full now. It just has to cover whatever you're going to put into it. Then you put your utensils in it. You throw all your metal knives, all your forks and spoons, or your other small pots into it. You make sure that it's boiling. Then you go ahead and take them out and you rinse them with cold water. If you can rinse it with cold water, kasher your sink first. Your sink would have to make sure that that's kosher first. You're not pouring chametz water onto your vessels. He removes them and rinses them with cold water. And the Torah's father, the Rosh, wrote, the law of large cauldrons is the same as any other vessels. That if it's not a ben yomai, for it is a ben yomai who kaidem shachamishes, as long as before the 5th hour, you don't need it to be kashered first. But if it's from the 5th hour and onward, the vessels be kashered first. So it's interesting. According to Rosh, he says you could actually first let that pot boil over with water, and while it's still boiling, you can, like I said before, throw in your other stuff. You don't have to rinse it out with cold water, then bring it back to a boil. You could actually rely on that kashering, and anything that's in it, minute, doesn't have to be kashered again, and then you just throw in your vessels into it, and that'll be kashered. So you bring it to boil, overflow, and then you could throw in the rest of your stuff in. Obviously, it's going to make it overflow more. So be careful about fires and spilling all over the place. But that's what he says. And of course, at this point, it's always important to first kosher your, the cradle that's holding the pots. That shouldn't be chametz. Making your pot more chametz when it boils over. The liquid touches that, then touches your pot again, recycling the chametz. So again, in order, kasher you have to first kasher the thing that holds your pot. Then you bring the pot to boil and you boil it over. When that's boiling, what I do is I take that and then I kosher my sink. Then I pour it all over my metal sink that was not used for a full day and it was cleaned out completely. All the cracks and crevices, and I put soap in all the little niche parts over there where it connects, and then you pour water all over it after it's not been used for a day, and then you refill it with water, and then you start kashering whatever else you need to kasher. Okay. If it's for the 5th hour of the day and it's actually we use that day, you need a kasher at first. Because the first agal of the water becomes forbidden. Because it's not 1/60th to make it nullified. And the measurements is calculated based on the entire vessel. So you need a really large vat for a pot to be 1/60th. V'nimsa mayim kula nesarin, thus the water becomes entirely forbidden. Not 1/60th of the chametz might be inside the pot. The entire pot has to be 1/60th to the water. And then you have to put the water. The water shouldn't become forbidden itself. V'nelim, b'kelim, v'negalim, b'saycham, and they absorb the utensils, the kasher inside them. So again, when it's not after the fifth hour and it's prohibited, so he's saying is that the stuff that comes out, that's already nullified, but in and of itself by being kashered, and since it's not the hour of prohibition yet, so therefore that water is allowed to be used. However, if it's after prohibition and then you want to use it, then that water itself is not going to be good, because that water also then will become prohibited because it has chametz absorption into it. I don't know why he's making a distinction. What about the fact that it's prohibited already after the fifth hour is making it that the water is not good? If there's chametz, then there's chametz for no matter when it is. If there's not chametz, then there's not chametz for when it is. My theory is that the Rosh is probably saying that once a rishon of chametz comes, so now you're taking a kli that you can't have any benefit from. So when you use the water, you're having benefit from now chametz water. So it's not the kosher part that's a problem, it's the benefit part that's a problem. You're benefiting from the water, not that there's chametz in the water. You know what I'm saying? The chametz is nullified, but you're benefiting from chametz water, so you can't use it to kasher anything anymore. Therefore, you have to wash that out and then use new water. But if it's not, but it's a ben yomov, or if it's not going to be chametz that goes with the water, or it's from before the fifth hour, you're allowed to have benefit from chametz water. So the technically chametz water is not really chametz water. You're allowed to have enough from, and then you benefit from, and then you could go ahead and kasher your kalim. Mind-blowing stuff. Always fun. If he leaves it there until the emissions are complete, but before the fifth hour, even though the water returns in to absorb the chametz again, we have no concern, because this is a time when chametz permitted, and it's like a secondary transfer of taste. So he's not really saying about how no the water, like I said. He's saying that there's a bar nice and tam. In other words, it's a secondary. It doesn't really give the full taste to it. But again, the question is why? Why does it not give the full taste here, but it gives the full taste there? The answer, I really think, boils down to hana. Now we're going to go to 453. It should be a little bit shorter, and I think we're finishing up these technical details, and we'll keep. Eventually, I promise, bli neder, we're going to get to the Seder. We're going to get to the fun laws of Pesach. So, this is Taf Nun Gimel. Elu Dvarim Sheyotzim Behem Yidei Chava Matzah. So these are the items that fill the obligation of matzah. Now we're talking matzah. We finished kashering, we finished looking for chametz and all that stuff. Now we're talking about what makes chametz. What makes matzah? How do you make matzah? Let's talk about how to make matzah. Bachitin, ubesairin, ubakusmin, ubeshvailis. So with wheat and barley, kusmin is spelt, and beshvailis is oat, shol and is rye, upishan. Right, ushalpi upishan. So shabbai shul is oat, ufishan and rye. So again, chitin is wheat, ubesairin is barley, ubekusmin is spelt, ubeshailas shul is oat, and ubeshpishan is rye. And the funny thing is about ubeshailas shul, there's a famous story, or there is a story, not a famous, there's a story in Tanakh, when the tribe of Binyamin was in big trouble with the other tribes because of the whole thing that happened with the Pelegish Begiva. And then they went ahead and there was a war between Ephraim and Binyamin. And the people from a certain tribe, family, they weren't able to say the shin sound, the sh sound. They only said sa. So the password to get into the city was Shiboila Shuel, which is oat. And the people from that were not able to say it, and they would say B'siboila Suel, because they couldn't say the shah sound, and then they weren't be able to sneak into the city. Interesting anecdote from, I believe it's in Shoftim. Judges. Aval im loy ba'oirez ushar manin, and now, but not in rice or any types of grain. You can't make it with rice, you can't make it with corn. That type of grain is not going to be good for matzah. Gam eina and bayin l'dei chametz, and also it cannot chansut chametz. You can't make it with chametz dough or chametz wheat. In other words, if you soak wheat and then let it just sit out, you can't make matzah with that. Umutter lasos behem tavshil, and it's permitted to make dishes from, but it's permitted to make dishes from rice and from other things. V'chein bechal manin kitnias, and likewise all kinds of kitnias. V'yesh asurin le'echol oirez v'chal manin kitnias b'tavshil. But some, interesting, this is Asher, this is not Sardim, this is the Tur. The Tur says you can make things out of kitnias. He says it outright. He says, V'yesh oishin, others make it usher. There's a minhag, yes, I know there's a minhag in Ashkenaz that came out of Germany not to have kitnias, but that came after the Gaonim's time. It really started basically right between the Gaonim period and the Rishonim period, right here, by like Rashi's time, and this is talking about the 900s, 1000s, beginning of 1100s. So in the beginning of 1200s, the Torah is writing, V'yesh oishin le'echol oirez, some say forbid to eat rice, v'chol minei kitnias b'tavshel, and all legumes. Tavshel not really. It's not all legumes. It's legumes that are designated in Talmud in the Gemara in the Talmud. If you look in the Mishnah in Zerayim, it designates all the types of kitnias that there are. Some are even more stringent and say even those that are not designated over there are still kitnias, like peanuts and corn. But I think minhag Ashkenaz is that peanuts and corn is not kitnias because it was not around at the time of the Gemara. It definitely was not around in the time of Europe when they made this designation of a decree, and therefore could not possibly be included in the decree. So it's not all legumes; it's only ones they knew about, and definitely it's not corn, and it's not, which is not even a legume anyway, and it's not peanuts, which even though it could be a legume, but at the same time, peanuts is a very different type of legume. Let's say then think about peanuts and think about edamame, very different type of legumes. Chickpeas, very different type of legume. Also the way it grows. Very different type. So therefore, even though science technically classifies peanuts as a legume, I wouldn't classify it as kitnias. Anyway, he says some forbid kitnias. Lafi sheminai chitin mizvarin behen. Now again, whenever we have a rabbinic decree, especially one that came after the Mishnayos, you have to understand what the decree went on and what the decree was purposed for. We don't do what's called making gedarim on gedarim on gedarim. When it comes to Torah law, the rabbis had the authority based on Deuteronomy 4:2 and based on Deuteronomy 13:1. It had the authority to make extra stringencies, and 17:8 to make extra stringencies around the Torah to guard the Torah. However, rabbinic decrees, even from the Mishnah, don't have extra stringencies, and the Gemara, we call that a shvus to shvus. A rabbinic decree upon a rabbinic decree. We don't do that. So certainly, decrees that came after the Gaonic period, in the time of the Rishonim, when we're talking about the Gemara was already codified, both the Jerusalem Talmud and both the Babylonian Talmud, both of them were codified already. We're talking about centuries later. And a new decree came, and yes, maybe it was enacted for all the people, of the area. And then I come from that area because I come from Germany. But still, you don't make gates upon gates upon gates on rabbinic decrees. That's not the way it works. Then it will be like you'll never have enough. There's a famous Mishnah. I'm getting on a tangent, but it's not a famous. Like I keep saying famous. There's a Mishnah in Yoma that says, the first Mishnah in Yoma, we prepare a wife for the Kohen Gadol just in case his current wife dies. Why? Because he's supposed to have a wife when he practices the Yom Kippur service. We learned that out of a pasuk. I'm not going to go into how. So the question is, why only pair one wife? Prepare a second wife, just in case the second wife dies also. You might have two wives, the first wife and second wife die, pair a third wife. So Rabbi Yehuda says, you're never going to end. The Mishnah said, the Rabbi Yehuda says prepare, and the Mishnah says you'll never have an end, because when are you going to stop? The same thing with stringencies when it comes to rabbinic decrees. So, kitnias is a rabbinic decree, and it was made for a specific purpose. So you only enact kitnias for the specific purpose and for the stuff that it's on. So not peanuts, not corn, which is not enacted as kitnias back then, and also for the reason. What was the reason for kitnias? The prohibition, lefi shaminai chitin misarin bahen, because grains may become mixed with them. V'chumra, because they grow wild. The main, if you look at the Mishnah, the main characteristic of all these kitnias is the fact that they grow wild near other fields. So we're talking about mustard seed. You can't make bread of mustard seed. You don't confuse mustard seed with grain. However, they grow near grain. These are things that commonly grow wild and grow near grain. So things that are wild and grow near grain and become indifferentiable as they grow because they grow together with it or amongst it, like sort of like weeds, even though not weeds because they're food. So the chumra yisira hizu. So it's an additional stringency. So we have the stringency, of course, regarding grains. There's additional stringency because they come immersed with grains. So this is something extra that the Gemara didn't even enact, but the rabbis enacted to make sure that there's no commingling and to make sure there's no chametz. The line of can, but the custom is not to follow the stringency. The Tur, thank you. The Tur says the custom is not to follow the stringency. Ve'im irav oirez im echad me'elu haminan. If one mixed rice with any other grains, v'yasam hemisa, and he made dough from them, im yesh ba tam dogon yotzen ba. If there's any taste of grain in it, then they're still valid, right? The grain is to overpower the kidneys. Of course, you have to protect the kidneys. You have to make sure that it's not mixed with grain, that the grain didn't get wet, and all that other stuff. Obviously, you take the stringencies, for Pesach, but. So v'chayeves bechala afilu sharui by oirez, and it's obligated in the midst of challah even if it's mostly rice. So he says not only is kidney is not a problem for Pesach, but it's also not a problem for challah so long as you have wheat taste. It's mixed with wheat. Now you're not going to take challah, the portion that we'd have to give to a kohen. These days we burn it or put it away. From rice, but from the 5 grains you would, and if rice mixed into it or other kidneys mixed into it, you would still do it. Kasav the Rif wrote, Yesh noigin levarer achitin echad v'echad machilas akvar. Some of the custom to check the wheat one by one for mouse droppings. That's a good custom. V'yesh oimrin she'ein tzarach. And some say it's not necessary. These days we have sieves, we have sifts, we have other ways of controlling that mice droppings don't get into it, so that's good. Dehu me Paris, for it is like fruit, and if you protect it and you hope that there's not going to be bugs or anything that's inside it. The Kosovo he wrote, now it's not like fruit, which it ferments, as we learned in the Mishnah. Lo yilchais adam chitin yitin ad michtoi. A person should not chew wheat and place it in his hand. Ve'ein lahakal, and one should not be lenient. V'chein nira she'ein lochush lezeh klal, because dust there should be no concern at all. The chashisha rechoika hi zay, because the concern is very remote. Loimar de tachmitz chita kasha b'mat roik b'shufni ha'akvar, to say that a small amount of saliva in a mouse would ferment wheat. Right, not worried that a mouse got into it, that it chewed it, then it spit it back out into the wheat. Dafilu, and that's why you're looking for the mouse droppings. Obviously, you want to take the mouse droppings out, but also you want to see evidence of a mouse near it or another animal. Dafilu lesisa shiraya be Gemara, for that even for barley is submitted in the Gemara. Aval shachimru hagainim la'isra, but the gainim were stringent and forbade it. V'aydafilu im yesh bahem neshuchin. Moreover, even if there are small bites in it, right, so that's evidence that the rodent was there. There's less than 1 or 1,000 that are nullified, and therefore clearly comes nullified. And even initially, we don't nullify this. If he does not grind, if he does not grind it to nullify it, because of Rav Alphas and the Rif writes, Shtarech lishmar chitin sheyotze bahem yedei matzah mishat ktsira, that he wrote that one must preserve wheat for matzah from the time of its harvest, shlo yivay aleihem mayim, so that the water does not reach it. Right? This is called shmur matzah. If you want to know what shmur matzah is, when it says in the box, this is shmur matzah or watch matzah. It's for when it was watched from the time it was cut, so that water and moisture doesn't get into the grains and thereby make it chametz before it even has a chance to turn into dough. Shalai yavay alein mayim, so water doesn't reach. V'yein elu harash kasav she'ena tzarech ela mishas tchina. The Rosh wrote is only necessary from the time of grinding. You don't need to do from the time of checking when it's cut, only for the time when it's actually grinding. Once it's ground and further, that's when you worry about it getting wet. V'noigin ba'Ashkenaz befartas l'shoimren mishas tchina, and the custom of Ashkenaz in France is to guard it from the time of tchina. So these days you'll find a lot of things that say shmira mishas ketzira. It's watched on the time of cutting. The minhag Ashkenaz is, German minhag is to only watch it in time that it's ground. Ki uz mikravin aisan al mayim shachod berechivin al mayim, because then when you combine it with water, then it spreads its seams. V'chein b'shaleihem. And so we see in responses. So before that, when wheat, even if it's cut, if it gets wet, it's not going to come chametz. It's only once it's ground, then it spreads, then it comes leavened. And then it could ferment. Loi noifkin yidei chavasa ella b'matzah demiktra mechimutz. It does not fulfill the obligation except for the matzah that's certainly free from chametz. Min kad nafal maya ayla, that from a vessel that fell into forbidden liquids, the and if it was not, and as long as it was not left with a non-Jew or a mute or a simpleton or a minor, mute is someone who can't converse anyway, not even with sign language. Loy nefika be yidei chayvasa. It does not nullify. It does not fulfill the obligation if it was left with them. Tshuva lagain l'chlay kimach mein ashok b'shas shat chakamuter. A response to the gain is that taking flour from the market for shat chak, if you in a situation where you just don't have another choice, that's fine, because it wasn't washed. Remember, you got to watch it from when it's ground, and when it's flour, it's already been ground. V'yotzin by the law machazkin aser. And it is valid as we do not presume it's prohibited. That's what some people say. Shmur matzah is best, but you don't have to have shmur matzah. Some are stringent, and some say even if it's not shmur matzah, as long as it's been checked, and we know that it didn't come chametz from the time it was flour until it was made, that's good enough. Avachila avi shamor. But initially, it's best if we could go ahead and make sure you only have shmur matzah, not shmur l'ketzira, but shmur tchina, watching from when it's ground. L'sisa afal pi shabegamara shirayla bechita hagainim asura. Sifting is prohibited by the gainim, even though the Gemara allows sifting. V'chein shdarchu mivivsa, and thus it is transmitted from the mitzvta. That she'eina nachnu bekiyin l'soicham, because we are not experts in sifting. L'chein ein loy l'soicha klal bechitin. Therefore, we do not sift wheat at all. V'kach b'soirin, and likewise for barley, etc., etc. So you don't. So that's the process you don't do. Okay, but we do is from the time it's ground, you watch it until it's made. Let's finish up the last one. Simin nun. Sorry, a tough nun. Dalid, I said matzah misulas naki. You should make matzah from fine, clean flour, even if it was as fine as Shlomo's matzah. The mafes adrara and Pirush Rashi explains afilu kulo soivin, even if it's entirely bran. Aval Rambam iser kulo soivin, but the Rambam forbade matzah made entirely of bran. Bran is the bottom part of the stalk. He wrote that it is not filled obligation neither bran bread nor coarse bread. Aval leish he ha'isa b'soivin shaba mususin v'yaisin ba. But if the dough is mixed with some bran and coarse flour, then it's fine. V'chein devar of alphas, the Rif says the same thing, that isa klavim, very low grade dough, bisman shorim oichlin shayamin yotzin ba. At a time when the shepherds eat it, it's valid. V'im lav ein yotzin ba, and if not, then it's not valid. Isa shabalisa racha l'chuta berachsin, dough that is soft at night and boiled in hot water. Loy michi lechem levarich aleha moitzi is not considered something you can even make a bracha of a moitzi on. So you leave it overnight and you boil it in hot water, sort of like bagels. But again, bagels are boiled in water and then they're baked. But if you just boil your dough to bread, so then you don't even make hamoitzi on them. Ve'im ifiyu besar kain betanor makom lachem inyan hamoitzi v'chala. And if it is baked afterwards in the oven and it's considered bread for hamoitzi, and then it is bread. So again, that's why bagels are hamoitzi, because you boil them in water and then you throw them into an oven. V'yotza ba yedei matzah, and it feels an obligation of matzah for that as well. V'ima balansa avar v'chula, if we have had a night it was stick and boiled and then baked. Hu lechem la'anya chala hamoitzi is considered bread and chala for hamoitzi. Aval ein yotza pesach, but it's not fulfill obligation for Pesach. So Rav Hai yotza by Pesach. Rav Hai says you still can fulfill your obligation for that in Pesach. The Chol Zeh Ladin HaGemara, and if all this is according to the views of the Gemara, Aval HaGoinim Asru Kol Chalita. But the Goinim said you cannot do any boiling. You cannot boil the bread. We're afraid it's going to come chametz. Matzah gezula en yotzeba. A stolen matzah, you don't feel the obligation with it. Bekitzoy shalako manikar bahem shaloi hechamitzu, and the dough of non-Jews where it is evident that it is not to become chametz. She'ein ba tziduk v'lai v'hiskun p'nehem, since he did not knead it or whiten its surfaces. It's permitted to eat it. Provided that one eats a kazayis, which is like an olive mound of the matzah, proper matzah, for the sake of filling his obligation afterwards. And some forbid eating these things anyway. Afilu l'shan akum b'fana v'loy nehiran l'elu l'avi arash zal. So unless the dough is in front of the non-Jews' teeth, but according to the Rush, it is not a concern. And therefore, it could be needed by a non-Jew, so long as it was in front of the person and you told it not to become chametz.